One of the outstanding topics that we've not been able to mention and that is really, really important for you guys to cover is what we call population genetics. And so by definition, population genetics refers to the study of changes in the frequency of allele and genotypes within a population. And so the people that specialize in population genetics, they are called population geneticists. So what they study is they study the genetic structure of populations and how this genetic structure, how they change geographically and how they change over a period of time. So the gene itself is a discrete unit of hereditary information that is consisting of a specific nucleotide sequence in DNA. So when we put, when hereditary information is encoded by a combination of nucleotides, that is a gene. Now, what are alleles? Alleles are alternative forms of a particular gene. For instance, when the gene is encoded is a skin color, there are different colors. So those different types, different forms of that color, the genes that encode these different forms, they are alleles. And remember when we said somebody is tall, so if we are talking about height, the alleles of height will be tall or short. So those alternative forms of genes that encode that specific character, they are called alleles. So the next terminology to define is the genotype. So what is a genotype? A genotype refers to the genetic makeup of an individual. So the genetic makeup of an individual is the genotype, while the phenotype refers to the physical traits of an organism. And because of the influence of lifestyle and the environment, is not every thing that is present, every information that is encoded in the genotype that is expressed as a phenotype. So that is why we have to describe the genetic makeup separately and the physical traits separately. Now, population genetics is guided by a rule. The Weinberg principle states that under certain conditions, allelic frequencies would remain constant from generation to generation. If there is no external interference, if something does not happen that would disrupt the balance, then the frequency of alleles would be constant from one generation to another. So you can start wondering that what sense does this mean and why is this important? You know, one of the basic questions that people ask is that how did human beings come into existence? Now, as Christians, we believe that God created heaven and earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day, God rested. And when the creation was complete. So, but there are different versions of theories, and there is a concept of evolution. In evolution, if you remember, one of the hallmarks of evolution is that human beings originated from other primates, let's say monkeys and chimpanzees. So that is what evolution tells us. Evolution is how things evolve from one state to another. And if you also look at from the angle of population, and if you remember in the olden days when everyone was in the village, what population genetics tells us is that if anybody does not leave the village, if we all stay where we are, the allelic frequencies will be the same. For instance, those that are tall will continue to be tall, their proportion will be the same, and those that are short will continue to be short. But for evolution to happen, we have to disrupt the Weinberg equilibrium. And there are several factors that we have to put into consideration. And why is this important for you? I think you may still be wondering that why is it important for you since you are taking cytogenetics? It is important because you can be in the situation where you are providing genetic counseling services to an individual. I remember when I mentioned about people marrying cousins. So population genetics allows us to understand the danger of or the potential side effects of that. So going by the Weinberg principle, it simply means allele frequencies will not change if nothing comes into external force comes in to disrupt the balance. So that is what the Weinberg principle is telling us. But we all know that allele frequencies do change. For instance, if a population in your village, if you ask when your parents were growing up, the number of youths, the number of aged people that they had there, the number of rich or whichever demographic index that you want to use, things do change over the years. And so, which means allele frequencies are not constant. It simply means the Weinberg principle is not obeyed. So what brings about this change in allele frequencies? At least there are 5 popular reasons why allele frequencies change, and these 5 popular reasons are being deployed as forces that are driving evolution. You understand what I'm trying to say? The 5 factors that can bring about changes in allele frequency are also regarded as the driving forces for evolution, and they can significantly alter allele frequencies of your population. And don't forget, population by definition is not just the Nigerian population. We can have population of animals, population of insects, population of something. So, but I think the basic definition of population is refers to the inhabitants of a particular place. For instance, if you say what is the population of Babcock University, population of Babcock University refers to the inhabitants, people that are staying in Babcock University. So if you say what is the population of Medical Laboratory Science Department, it talks about the individuals that are in Medical Laboratory Science Department. So if I say what is the population of 500 level, it talks about the population of a particular class. So that is what population that I've been mentioning over and over again is happening. And before I even mention the factors that influence changes in allele frequency, let us also reason it out. What do you think can bring about changes in the demography, in allele frequencies in your class? For instance, if you go back down memory lane when you guys started in 100 level, you guys that are now in final year that will be leaving the halls very, very soon. Now, let's say the total number of you guys that started the program in 100 level, let's say you guys were 100, but I'm very, very sure you are no longer 100, because let's say some people did not pass, failed some courses, and in some circumstances, some unfortunate circumstances might happen. Someone might actually die, and so you would have remembered a couple of your colleagues that are no longer with you. Some did not meet up the required CGPA and had to leave other departments. So whatever reasons, I'm really, really sure that all of you guys that started the course may not be finishing together. And that's perfectly okay. That is how life is. So, which simply means that at the Weinberg equilibrium and the Weinberg principle is not being obeyed in your particular class. And so a static, I don't think population is static. Population is highly dynamic. Changes are always happening within a population. And these changes actually influence the quality of the population. For instance, let's look at let's look at some animals. Let's say you are in the wild in an open field, and you have two animals that the eagle wants to pick up. One, let's say the background of the environment is white, and one of these organisms is red. Now look at having a red object on a white background. It's much easier to see that red object. But now see, if the ground floor is white in color, another organism is also white in color, which means it is picking up the color of the environment. Over a period of time, you will see that as predators feast, it becomes easier for them to kill the red colored organism or animal that they can easily see. And over a period of time, you will see that the allele frequency of that red colored organisms will continue to drop, while the number of the white colored organisms that have already been adapted for survival will continue to increase. So that is even in human health, in health diseases. Some mutations allow individuals to better survive, and I don't think there is a better example than the AS genotype. I think it's been postulated and is widely regarded as individuals with AS are better able to handle malaria more than AA. So you know malaria is a disease that kills a lot of people in our environment. Yeah. So among individuals that are really, really poor, and so it's much likely that you're going to see more AS than AA, than SS. So whatever mutation, whatever adaptation that the body has, and has allowed it to be able to survive over a period of time, the number of individuals that have that modification that is pro-life would eventually be higher than the number of individuals without that particular trait. So let's now go back to the 5 evolutionary forces that influence allele frequency change. The first one is mutation. The second one is migration. The third one is genetic drift. The fourth one is non-random mating, while the last evolutionary force is selection. Let's start with mutation, and I think I've been using that AS as an example. But when you look at it's a two-way thing. When you look at mutation as it is, let's look at if we are regarding mutation as a very bad thing. And let's just stick with sickle cell disease. You understand that because of that error in sickle cell and that is responsible for sickle cell disease, the number of individuals with sickle cell disease has been reducing globally. I think in the US there are only 100,000 Americans that have sickle cell disease. So, and you know, you can argue like people are more aware about sickle cell disease, yes, but you can also look at the fact that it is the chance of survival of individuals with sickle cell disease is lower compared to individuals without sickle cell disease, which means some of them might have died. So when you have mutations that do not support life, mutation is a really, really important factor in altering allele frequencies. That is a very, very valid point. And it is actually seen, mutation is regarded as the ultimate source of new variation. It's through mutation that new characters are acquired. It's through mutation that changes are introduced into a particular population. And don't forget, mutations happen at a very high rate, and the only ones that will be propagated are the ones that are somehow beneficial to the body or not. So if during this process of DNA replication a mutation arose and is supportive of life, that mutation will be propagated from generation to another, and there will be a deviation from the wild type. So mutation is mutation is not an entirely bad thing as we have been making it to be like. Mutation can actually be good when the new product allows the patient to survive longer than before. And if I will even take this a step further, mutation in an African population, I was reading the papers, I think sometimes last year, about a peculiar mutation that they found in a South African lady. And that mutation confers protection on individuals with against a particular disease. So that gene that has been mutated, they produce a product, a gene product, and that gene product is now being sold as drug to Americans that have a very peculiar disease. So mutation is not always a bad thing. It can actually confer protection on individuals. Migration results in allele frequency changes in the population. There can be two ways: immigration and emigration. New people can be coming into a population, thus changing the dynamics, while people can be leaving a population. And this is actually a very potent agent of change. Pre-independence, I don't think Nigeria had maybe any Chinese in Nigeria. But look at what we have now. Chinese individuals are ubiquitous. They are everywhere because they are not coming into our community, into Nigeria. The dynamics of our population is changing. And this is something that is happening across the world. Many Nigerians are going to Canada now, such that when they are trying to do the population genetics of Canada, because people from different parts of the world are coming into that country, there has been allele frequency changes in that community. That is how you explain it at every species level. When people are leaving the community, those ones, for instance, if tall people were numerous in a particular community, but a policy was introduced that made tall people to not find life in that community to be comfortable. So what would they do? They leave the community gradually, and over a period of time, the allele frequency for tall people, for tallness in that particular population, will significantly drop. And the ones that will not be predominant will be the short people. Also, if you look at very hot climate, in which individuals that only have melanin can survive very hot weather. So those that do not have that particular feature, they may initially struggle to live, to survive in that, but eventually when they find that this is too unbearable for them, they leave. So when things become unbearable for a particular individuals with a particular allele, they tend to leave that particular population. And when people are leaving, the frequency of the alleles would also change. So migration is a very potent change, factor of change in a population. Genetic drift. Some aspect of it is similar to migration. When there is and it can happen in two ways. Genetic drift refers to the random loss of alleles, and is more likely to occur in smaller populations. So there are two ways genetic drift happen. There is one that is called the founder effect, in which a smaller group of individuals now establish a population in a new location. For instance, let's say there were a group of people were living. I think there are several examples of that in the Bible, when people will be going on a journey and they will now find a comfortable place and they will now say that okay, this is where I'm going to establish myself. So that is founder effect. So they were part of the population before, but they left and established a population in a new location. So you can explain that in your own words, but that is a founder effect under genetic drift. And bottleneck effect also refers to a sudden increase in population size due to natural forces. And that bottleneck effect is what I also explained when I was saying that some natural forces that ensures that only a particular group of organisms or species are better adapted for this. That igloo example is actually very straightforward. Individuals, organisms that can be easily picked would be the ones that will be dying. So that is the bottleneck effect. They cannot do anything about it because it's the color of their skin. The ones that have a feature that ensures that they are not easily seen, as the eagles are picking the ones that they can easily see one after the other, the ones that they cannot easily see, their own frequency will begin to increase in that population. Their number will increase in that population, and eventually they will become the predominant member of that population. Then there is also non-random mating, and I think this is happening in our society. There are some requirements for the Hadley-Weinberg equilibrium to be obeyed, but a major reason for allele frequency change, another one is non-random mating. What am I trying to say? Onye is from Igbo land, and Larry is a Yoruba guy, and let's say they were in love, they liked each other when they were in school. But you know, marriage changes and everything in Nigerian politics, in Nigerian polity. And so Onye now took Lanre home. And what is his name of this old actor that of this Igbo origin? Let's say that is her father. She is called traditional and will only allow her daughter to marry Igbo guy. So that is no longer random. When there are rules that you've already put in place that people cannot mate randomly. So Yorubas will prefer to marry Yoruba, Igbos will prefer to marry Igbos. So that is no longer random mating. Or if somebody is tall, you only want to marry somebody that is short. It's no longer random. And people that are short will not prefer to marry one another. That is no longer random. And mating that occurs more or less frequently than expected by chance. Things ought to be expected by chance, just random. No rules attached. Okay, this is the person I want to marry. Whatever you see, mating in an Hadley-Weinberg equilibrium is expected to be random. But when it is not random, then you are not obeying the rule. For instance, Igbos that are expected to marry Igbos, for instance, they will say you are marrying from your village or from your autonomous community. There is a word for that. It is called inbreeding. So when cousins marry cousins, that is inbreeding. When you are marrying people that are close to you in terms of your family, that is inbreeding. And what is the risk of that? It increases homozygosity. For instance, if there is a disease that runs in your family and you are a carrier, if you are marrying that, the closer you are marrying, the closer the person you are marrying, then the more likelihood that homozygosity will arise. For instance, look at it. It's just like AS marrying AS. Their chance of having babies with SS is very, very high. So that is homozygosity, and we don't want that in the population. In agriculture, that is possible if they actually want that character. Agriculture is different from human beings. If they want that a particular character to propagate in a population, in an agricultural population, they can actually encourage inbreeding. But in human societies, inbreeding will only lead to problems. A disease that you are a carrier with, why not just go outside and dilute that so that future generation, that disease will not manifest? So that is why this course is important for you, so that you'll be able to understand and analyze the situation. And when you are married within yourself, intentionally married within yourself, that is inbreeding. And today we also have people that are intentionally deciding to marry outside of their population, outside of their autonomous communities. I remember when I was in school, I studied in the East. I had Igbo guys as friends that they said that they vowed that they want to marry a Yoruba lady. So they've decided on their own that that's what they want to do. So that is called outbreeding. When you are deciding to mate with non-relatives, that is outbreeding. And the advantage of that is that it increases heterozygosity. Heterozygosity allows you to move away from some diseases. So if there is a disease that runs within your family and you are marrying somebody that is entirely not related to you, then the likelihood of that disease manifesting is significantly reduced. And there is also selection. In selection, there can be members of a society that will leave behind more offsprings than another. So we have artificial selection, in which breeders select organisms that they want to survive, to continue to survive in that environment for desired characteristics. For instance, let's say you want to have cows that are big in size, so that is artificial selection. These ones that are big in size, you select them. If you are rearing goats that have a particular color they are of interest to you, you select them. And it also happens naturally too. I think, the artificial selection. So how does that play out in medicine? There was a time there is this facility in the UK, Medical Research Council, and I saw how they actually breed rats that they desire their character. They manipulate the genes. And they insert the characters that they desire. So that is artificial selection. The ones that have acquired that character, they allow them to mate and increase. The ones that don't have that character, they just kill them off. That is artificial selection. But in natural selection, it is also going back to the tale of the eagle again. Environment will sort itself out. Those that cannot adapt will die off, and those that can adapt will propagate in size. So there are different types of variation. We have phenotypic variation and we have genetic variation. Phenotypic variation simply means sometimes the genetic component is not changed, it's just the physical manifestations that are altered. In genetic variation, in which we are talking about differences in the genetic components too. So natural selection is a process by which heritable traits that make it more likely for an organism to survive and successfully reproduce become more common in populations over successive generations. Like those that the circumstances around that population is favoring, they will be the ones that will continue to survive and increase in size. And the Wilbur equilibrium describes the character of a non-evolving population. And it describes the gene pool. The gene pool describes the total genes in a population. If people are mating randomly, if new people are not coming into the population and people are not leaving the population, the gene pool will be the same. The Wilbur theory says that the frequencies of allele in a population's gene pool remain constant over the generations unless acted on by agents other than sexual recombination. Sexual recombination is a natural process, and there is space for that in the Wilbur equilibrium. But when other forces other than sexual recombination comes into play, then the Wilbur equilibrium is not obeyed. But what are the uses of the Wilbur equilibrium? Next class on Monday, whenever we are able to see, we are going to do calculations. I just want to introduce this so that you have an idea of what we are doing. So what do we use the Wilbur equilibrium for? We can use it to calculate the frequency of a gene in a population. If you know the frequency of the genotype, you can calculate the frequency of the gene. And we can use it in genetic disease counseling. And it's also relevant in allowing us to understand population. And we said the Wilbur equilibrium is maintained only if a population meets these 5 requirements. The population must be very large in size. The population must be isolated from other populations, because migration, like we said, can affect the gene pool. And there is no net mutations. Mutation is not happening. And the next point is that matings are random and there is no natural selection. So the conclusion as far as the Wilbur equilibrium is concerned is that it describes an ideal situation, but unfortunately such an ideal situation never exists in nature. But we base our calculation, all things being equal, it allows us to have an estimate, an idea of how things will be in an ideal situation. And we've described our genetic equilibrium, the Wilbur, how natural forces do not support the Wilbur equilibrium. So in conclusion, I want you to understand the definition of population genetics, the definition of the various terms, the factors that maintain a society, and the Wilbur equilibrium, the factors that ensures that the Wilbur equilibrium is not obtained, is not maintained, and why these factors are important in a population. And so those are the things that I want you to understand. The second aspect of this class will be straightforward calculation. I don't think I can be teaching calculation on this route, so I beg, get prepared, read up. So next class I will just summarize this and I go straight into the calculations.